Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked up at the massive engine room around him. The Stellar Dawn was the biggest ship he had ever seen, filled with aliens from 5 different worlds. He was the only human on board, working as a maintenance worker while the real engineers did the important jobs. The ship hummed with a deep sound that Jake had learned to recognize. For 3 months, he had been crawling through tight spaces, fixing small problems that the alien crew thought were beneath them. They were polite enough, but Jake could tell they thought humans were not very smart. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of Earth's best machines. Jake did not mind being ignored. He liked working with his hands and figuring out how things worked. The alien machines were strange, but metal was metal and energy was energy. The basic rules were the same everywhere. The alarm started without warning. Red lights flashed throughout the engine room as a loud siren filled the air. Jake dropped his tools and looked around as alien crew members rushed past him. Chief Engineer Grox, a tall insect-like creature with 4 arms, was shouting orders in his clicking language. "What is happening?" Jake asked one of the smaller workers. But the alien just pushed past him without answering. The ship began to shake. At first it was just a small vibration, but it grew stronger every second. Jake grabbed onto a support beam as loose objects started falling from shelves. The deep hum of the engines changed to a higher, more urgent sound. Commander Zexhias' voice came over the communication system. His words were calm, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "All crew to emergency stations. We have a critical failure in the quantum drive system. Prepare for possible evacuation." Jake had never heard those words before on the Stellar Dawn. The ship was supposed to be perfect, built with the best technology from across the galaxy. He watched as Chief Engineer Grox gathered his team around the main control panel. Their 4 arms moved quickly over the controls, but Jake could see confusion in their large black eyes. The shaking got worse. Jake had to hold on with both hands to keep from falling. Sparks began shooting from control panels around the room. The lights flickered on and off. Something was very wrong. "The quantum fields are fighting each other," one of the engineers said in the common language that all species could understand. "The computer cannot find the source of the problem." "Run full diagnostics on all systems," Grox ordered. "Check every connection, every power flow." "There must be an error somewhere." Jake moved closer to listen. He could not understand all the technical words they were using, but he understood machines. Something about their approach felt wrong to him. They were looking at numbers on screens instead of listening to what the ship was trying to tell them. The quantum drive core was located in the center of the ship, surrounded by thick walls that kept the dangerous energy contained. Jake had seen it during his first week on board. It was beautiful in a scary way, like looking at a small star held in place by invisible forces. Now he could hear it through the walls, and the sound was not right. "Sir," one of the engineers called out, "the quantum field generators are showing perfect readings. All systems report normal function. But the resonance patterns are completely wrong." "That is impossible," Grox replied. "If the readings are normal, the system should be stable." Jake knew that was not how machines really worked. Numbers could lie, but the sounds and vibrations never did. He closed his eyes and listened carefully to the ship around him. Under the alarms and shouting, he could hear the real problem. The quantum generators were not broken. They were working exactly as they were designed to work. But they were working against each other instead of together. It was like having 2 people try to carry a heavy box while pulling in different directions. Both people were strong, but they would never move the box that way. "Excuse me," Jake said, stepping toward the group of engineers. Grox looked at him with surprise. "Human Jake, you should not be here. This is a technical emergency?" "I think I know what the problem is," Jake said. The alien engineers looked at each other. One of them made a sound that Jake had learned was laughter, but not the nice kind. "The quantum drive system is beyond human understanding," Grox said, not unkindly. "Please go to your emergency station." The ship shook harder. Jake could hear metal beginning to bend under stress. They did not have much time. "The generators are fighting each other," Jake said quickly. They are both working, but they are not working together. The computer thinks everything is fine because each generator is doing its job, but the jobs are wrong. That makes no sense, one of the engineers said. The computer calculates the optimal field configurations. It cannot be wrong. Jake wanted to explain, but he did not have the right words for what he was hearing. It was like trying to describe the color blue to someone who had never seen the sky. Can I look at the service tunnels near the generators? Absolutely not, Grok said firmly. Those areas are too dangerous for humans during a crisis. The lights went out completely for 3 seconds, then came back dimmer than before. Jake could smell something burning. All hands prepare for evacuation, Commander Zexhai announced. The quantum core is approaching critical instability. We have 15 minutes before containment failure. Jake felt his heart race. If the quantum core failed, it would not just destroy the ship. It would create a hole in space that could swallow everything for miles around. He had to try something, even if the aliens thought he was wrong. While the engineers were busy preparing the evacuation systems, Jake slipped away from the main engine room. He knew the ship's service tunnels better than anyone because he spent most of his time crawling through them. The aliens were too big to fit in most of the narrow spaces, so they had never bothered to learn the routes that Jake used every day. The tunnels were hot and filled with the smell of overheated metal. Jake crawled quickly through passages that led toward the quantum core. He could feel the wrongness getting stronger as he got closer. The vibrations in the walls told him a story that no computer could read. The first quantum field generator was working too hard, spinning faster than it should. The second generator was trying to match it, but it was slightly out of time. The third and fourth generators were fighting to keep up. None of them were broken, but they were like musicians playing the same song at different speeds. Jake found the manual adjustment controls that the aliens never used, because their computers handled everything automatically. The controls were simple mechanical devices, the kind that humans still used on Earth. Jake understood them perfectly. He began turning dials and moving switches, listening carefully to how the ship's sounds changed with each adjustment. He ignored the computer screens that showed warning messages in alien languages. Instead, he trusted his ears and the feeling in his hands as the vibrations traveled through the metal. Slowly, carefully, Jake began to bring the generators into harmony. It was like tuning a giant musical instrument. When the first 2 generators matched their rhythm, the ship's shaking decreased slightly. Jake smiled and kept working. The quantum core's angry whining began to change into something closer to its normal deep hum. Jake could feel the difference in his bones. The ship was starting to heal itself. Above him, in the main engine room, alarms suddenly stopped blaring. The emergency lights changed from red to yellow. Chief Engineer Grok stared at his instruments in complete confusion as all the readings returned to normal. Jake crawled out of the service tunnel just as the engines settled into their peaceful rhythm. The crisis was over, but Jake could see from the aliens' faces that a new kind of trouble was just beginning. They were all staring at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was the look of someone who had just witnessed something impossible. The next morning, Jake woke up with a strange feeling that something had changed. The ship felt normal again, humming with its usual peaceful sound. But when he walked to the dining hall for breakfast, conversations stopped as soon as people saw him. Alien crew members who had never paid attention to him before were now watching his every move. Jake sat down at his usual table in the corner, away from the important officers. He ate his food quietly and tried to ignore the staring. But it was hard to pretend everything was normal when 3 different aliens were pointing devices at him from across the room. "Jake Morrison, please report to the medical bay after your meal," a voice announced over the ship's communication system. It was Dr. Kaylara Neff, the chief science officer. Jake had only met her once before, during his first health check when he joined the crew. Jake finished eating and made his way to the medical section. The corridors seemed different now. Crew members stepped aside when they saw him coming, but not in a respectful way. It felt more like they were afraid to get too close. as if he might be dangerous. Dr. Neth was waiting for him in the examination room. She was a Melody with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved independently of each other. Her species was known for being very smart and for having special mental abilities that humans did not understand. "Please sit here, Jake," she said, pointing to a chair surrounded by strange machines. "I need to run some tests to make sure yesterday's emergency did not harm you." Jake sat down, though he felt perfectly fine. "What kind of tests?" "Just routine scans," Dr. Neth said, but her voice sounded too casual. "We want to make sure the quantum field exposure did not damage your brain." Jake had been around machines long enough to know when someone was not telling the whole truth. The devices Dr. Neth was setting up were not the simple medical scanners he had seen before. These were much more complex, with parts that looked like they were designed to look deep inside his head. "How long will this take?" Jake asked. "Not long at all," Dr. Neth replied. She pressed a button and Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his skull. "Just try to relax and think about normal things." The tingling got stronger. Jake tried to think about normal things like Dr. Neth had said, but it was hard to concentrate with the weird feeling in his head. He found himself remembering yesterday's crisis, how he had listened to the ship and understood what was wrong when all the smart aliens could not figure it out. Dr. Neth made a small sound of surprise. She was looking at a screen that showed colorful patterns Jake did not recognize. Her 4 hands moved quickly over different controls, adjusting the machines around him. "Very interesting," she said quietly, more to herself than to Jake. "What's interesting?" Jake asked. "Oh, nothing to worry about," Dr. Neth said quickly. "Your brain appears to be completely healthy. In fact, it shows some very unusual patterns that I have never seen before." Jake did not like the way she said unusual. In his experience, when aliens called humans unusual, it was never good news. The scanning session lasted much longer than Dr. Neth had promised. When it was finally over, Jake felt tired and slightly dizzy. Dr. Neth helped him stand up, but she was studying him with the intense look that scientists got when they found something fascinating. "Can I go back to work now?" Jake asked. "Of course," Dr. Neth said. "But I may need to do a few more tests over the next few days just to be completely sure you are healthy." Jake left the medical bay feeling confused and worried. He had been perfectly healthy when he arrived, and he felt fine now. Why did Dr. Neth need more tests? When he got back to the engine room, Chief Engineer Grox was waiting for him. The tall alien's 4 arms were folded in a way that Jake had learned meant he was thinking hard about something. "Human Jake," Grox said, "I have been reviewing yesterday's events. The computer records show that the quantum drive system stabilized. At exactly the same time you were in the service tunnels near the field generators." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "I was just doing my job, checking for damage." "Yes, but the interesting thing is that you made manual adjustments to systems that our computers said were working perfectly," Grox continued. "How did you know to make those specific changes?" Jake tried to think of a way to explain without sounding crazy. The ship sounded wrong. "I could hear that the generators were not working together." Grox's large black eyes studied Jake's face. "You could hear quantum field resonance patterns?" "I guess so," Jake said. "It was like listening to an engine that's running rough. You can tell something's wrong even if all the gauges look normal." "Fascinating," Grox said. "I would like you to help me with some other technical problems we have been having. Nothing urgent, just some puzzles that our team has been working on for several weeks." Jake spent the rest of the day helping Grox with various mechanical issues around the ship. Each problem was different, but Jake found that he could usually figure out what was wrong by listening and feeling rather than looking at computer readouts. What surprised him was how excited Grox became each time Jake solved something quickly. "Remarkable," Grox would say, making notes on a device Jake had never seen him use before. "You identified the harmonic interference in the cooling system within minutes. Our analysis had been running for 6 days. By the end of the day, Jake realized that Grox was not just asking for help. He was testing Jake, seeing what kinds of problems he could solve. Jake began to feel like a laboratory animal being put through mazes. That evening, Jake was walking back to his quarters when he heard voices coming from a conference room. The door was slightly open, and he recognized Commander Zexhi's voice. Jake knew he should not listen, but something made him stop. "The Galactic Scientific Consortium is very interested in our report," Commander Zexhi was saying. "They have never encountered cognitive patterns like this before. The human's brain shows neural pathway formations that are completely different from any known species," Dr. Neth's voice replied. "His problem-solving process does not follow logical sequences. Instead, he appears to use what humans call intuition." "Is that significant?" asked another voice that Jake did not recognize. "Extremely significant," Dr. Neth said. "Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolve similar thought patterns. We rely on computational analysis and logical deduction. This human uses spatial reasoning and pattern recognition in ways that bypass normal logic entirely." Jake's blood turned cold. They were talking about his brain like it was some kind of machine they wanted to study. "What are the consortium's recommendations?" Commander Zexhi asked. "They want us to continue detailed analysis," Dr. Neth said. "They are particularly interested in preserving these unique cognitive patterns for further study." "Preserving?" the unknown voice asked. "Neural extraction and mapping," Dr. Neth explained. "It would allow us to understand exactly how human intuitive thinking works. The potential applications could revolutionize problem-solving across the galaxy." Jake felt sick. Neural extraction sounded like something that would not leave him alive to enjoy the benefits. He backed away from the door as quietly as possible and hurried to his quarters. Once he was alone, Jake sat on his small bed and tried to make sense of what he had heard. The alien crew was no longer just curious about how he had fixed the ship. They wanted to take apart his brain to figure out how human thinking worked. Jake had always known that humans were considered primitive by galactic standards. Earth had only been contacted by alien civilizations 50 years ago, and humans were still not full members of the galactic community. That meant Jake probably did not have the same rights as the other crew members. He thought about trying to contact Earth, but the stellar dawn was deep in unexplored space, far from any communication networks that reached human worlds. He was completely alone, surrounded by aliens who saw him as a fascinating specimen rather than a person. Jake lay down and stared at the ceiling, trying to think of a way out of his situation. The same intuitive thinking that had saved the ship might now be the thing that got him killed. But maybe, just maybe, it could also be the thing that saved his life. He closed his eyes and listened to the ship around him, hoping it might tell him what to do next. Jake spent the next 3 days pretending everything was normal while his mind raced with worry. Every time Dr. Neth called him for another test, he went without complaint. Every time Chief Engineer Grox gave him a new problem to solve, he helped as best he could. But now he understood what was really happening. They were not just curious about him anymore. They were preparing him for something terrible. The tests were getting longer and more intense. Dr. Neth would attach strange devices to his head that made his thoughts feel fuzzy. She asked him to solve puzzles while machines scanned his brain, watching how his mind worked through problems that the aliens found impossible. "Very good, Jake," Dr. Neth would say after each session. "Your neural patterns become more interesting every day." Jake wanted to ask what she meant, but he was afraid the answer would make everything worse. Instead, he tried to pay attention to what the machines were doing. Some of them looked like they were making maps of the inside of his head. Others seemed to be recording everything his brain did while he was thinking. On the 4th day, Jake could not stand it anymore. When Dr. Neth finished her morning tests, he decided to ask the question that had been bothering him since he overheard the conversation. "Dr. Neth," Jake said carefully, "what exactly are you looking for in these tests?" "Doctor." Neth paused in the middle of putting away her equipment. For a moment, she looked almost guilty. "I am studying how human brains work, Jake. Your species thinks in ways that are completely different from every other intelligent life form we have discovered." "Different how?" Dr. Neth sat down across from him, her forearms folding in a way that Jake had learned meant she was choosing her words carefully. Most species in the galaxy think in similar patterns. We use logic and computational analysis to solve problems. We break everything down into smaller parts and examine each piece separately. That sounds smart, Jake said. It is smart, Dr. Neff agreed, but it is also limited. When you fixed the quantum drive, you did something that our most advanced computers could not do. You understood the problem as a whole system instead of separate parts. You heard patterns that our instruments could not detect. Jake was starting to understand, but he did not like where this was going. So, you want to figure out how I did it? The Galactic Scientific Consortium believes that human intuitive thinking could change everything, Dr. Neff said. Imagine if we could solve problems the way you do. We could design better ships, create new technologies, maybe even prevent wars by understanding complex situations in ways we never could before. That sounds good, Jake said slowly. But why do I get the feeling there's something you're not telling me? Dr. Neff looked away from him. The consortium has classified your neural patterns as critically valuable genetic material. They believe the only way to fully understand human intuitive thinking is to preserve and study it in detail. Preserve it how? Neural extraction. Dr. Neff said quietly. They would remove your brain and keep it alive in a special container where it could be studied safely. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. You want to cut out my brain? I do not want to do anything, Dr. Neff said quickly. This is the consortium's decision. I'm just following orders. But I would die, Jake said, his voice shaking. Your brain would continue to function, Dr. Neff explained. You would still be able to think and solve problems. In some ways, you would be helping the entire galaxy become smarter. Jake stood up so fast that his chair fell over. I would be a brain in a jar. How is that helping anyone? Jake, please understand, Dr. Neff said, standing up as well. Humans are not considered a fully intelligent species under galactic law. You do not have the same rights as other crew members. The consortium has the legal authority to authorize your processing for the benefit of galactic civilization. Jake stared at her in shock. Processing? Is that what you call cutting someone's brain out? I know it sounds harsh, Dr. Neff said. But think about all the good that could come from this. Your unique way of thinking could help millions of beings across the galaxy. What about what I want? Jake asked. Don't I get a say in whether my brain gets cut out? Dr. Neff looked uncomfortable. The consortium has already made their decision. We will reach Starbase 7 in 72 hours. The extraction will take place there. Jake felt his legs get weak. 72 hours. 3 days. That was how long he had left to live as a complete person. Dr. Neff, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, do you think this is right? The alien scientist was quiet for a long time. I think your brain is remarkable, she finally said. I think studying it could lead to incredible discoveries. But I also think you are more than just a brain. You are a person who saved this ship and everyone on it. That should count for something. But not enough to change the consortium's mind. I am afraid not, Dr. Neff said sadly. I'm sorry, Jake, I truly am. Jake left the medical bay feeling like he was walking through a bad dream. 72 hours. He had to find a way to escape or convince someone to help him. But how could he fight against the most powerful organization in the galaxy? That afternoon, Commander HFY called Jake to his office. The commander was a Vortanian, tall and thin with skin that looked like it was made of crystal. Jake had always thought he seemed fair and reasonable, but now he was not sure who he could trust. Sit down, Jake, Commander HFY said. His voice sounded tired. I imagine Dr. Neff has explained the situation to you. She told me you want to cut out my brain, Jake said. Commander HFY winced. I want you to know that this decision did not come from me. The orders came directly from the Galactic Scientific Consortium. As a starship commander, I am required to follow their directives. Do you agree with them? Jake asked. Commander HFY was quiet for a moment. I have been a starship commander for 23 years, he said finally. I have served with crew members from dozens of different species. I have learned that intelligence comes in many forms and every form has value. But I am also sworn to serve the greater good of galactic civilization, Commander Zexhai continued. If your sacrifice could benefit billions of beings, is it not worth considering? Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Easy to say when it's not your brain they want to cut out? You are right, Commander Zexhai said. It is easy for me to talk about sacrifice when I am not the one being sacrificed. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Then help me, Jake said. You're the captain of this ship. You could refuse to hand me over. Commander Zexhai shook his head slowly. If I disobeyed a direct consortium order, they would remove me from command and send another ship to collect you. It would only delay the inevitable? Jake slumped in his chair. So there's nothing I can do? I did not say that, Commander Zexhai said quietly. I said there is nothing I can do officially. But this ship has escape pods, and sometimes equipment malfunctions happen during long space voyages. Jake looked up at the commander with surprise. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that if a certain human crew member happened to disappear during a routine maintenance check, it might take us several hours to discover what happened, Commander Zexhai said. And space is very large. Finding one small escape pod would be extremely difficult. Jake felt hope for the first time in days. You would really help me escape? I would look the other way if someone happened to help themselves, Commander Zexhai said carefully. But Jake, you must understand that running will only buy you time. The consortium will never stop looking for you. And eventually, they will find you. Maybe, Jake said. But at least I'll have a chance to fight back. Commander Zexhai nodded slowly. Perhaps that is all any of us can ask for. The chance to fight for what we believe is right. Jake left the commander's office with a plan forming in his mind. He had 72 hours to figure out how to escape from the most advanced ship in the galaxy. It seemed impossible, but Jake had learned that impossible things sometimes just needed to be approached in a different way. He walked through the corridors of the stellar dawn, listening to the ship's familiar sounds. Maybe, just maybe, the ship would tell him how to get away. Jake spent the first day planning his escape carefully. He could not just steal a shuttle and hope for the best. The aliens would catch him in minutes if he tried something that obvious. He needed to be smarter than that. The key was understanding how the ship's security systems worked. Most alien technology was designed to be logical and predictable. The security computers expected people to behave in logical ways. But Jake was learning that being unpredictable might be his biggest advantage. He started small. During his normal maintenance work, Jake began creating tiny problems throughout the ship. He loosened a connection here, adjusted a setting there. Each problem was so minor that it would barely be noticed, but Jake was building something bigger. The ship's computers were designed to fix small problems automatically. When one system had trouble, the computer would redirect power from other systems to compensate. Jake was counting on this automatic response to help him create chaos when he needed it most. On the second day, Jake discovered he had an unexpected ally. He was working in a maintenance tunnel when he heard someone crawling toward him. Jake grabbed his tools, ready to pretend he was doing normal repairs. But the person who appeared surprised him completely. It was another human. Don't look so shocked, the woman said with a small smile. I know we're rare out here, but we do exist. Jake stared at her. I didn't know there was another human on this ship. Lieutenant Nora Blake, communications officer, she said, extending her hand. I've been monitoring consortium transmissions for the past week. I know what they're planning to do to you. Jake shook her hand, feeling relieved to talk to someone from his own species. How much do you know? Enough to know that you're not the only human they're interested in, Nora said grimly. I've intercepted messages about something called the Human Cognitive Study Project. They want to bring more humans up from Earth for testing. Jake felt sick. More people like me? Engineers, artists, musicians, anyone who shows what they call non-logical problem-solving abilities, Nora explained. Your escape from that quantum drive crisis has convinced them that human brains are worth studying on a large scale. We have to warn Earth, Jake said. We will, Nora agreed. But first we have to get you out of here alive. I've been working on a plan. Nora explained that she had been using her position in communications to monitor the ship's security systems. She knew which routes were watched and which ones were ignored. More importantly, she had access to the shuttle bay control systems. The problem is timing, Nora said. Even if we steal a shuttle, they'll track us down before we can reach anywhere safe. We need a bigger distraction, Jake smiled. I think I can help with that. He told Nora about the small problems he had been creating throughout the ship. Individually, they were harmless. But if they all happened at the same time, the ship's automatic repair systems would be overwhelmed. The computers will try to fix everything at once, Jake explained. They'll start moving power and resources around the ship in ways that don't make sense. It'll create confusion and system failures that will keep the crew busy for hours. That's brilliant, Nora said. But how do you make them all happen at the same time? Easy, Jake replied. I just need to trigger one big problem that will cause a cascade failure. The ship's computers will try to compensate, but they'll run into all the little problems I've been setting up. It'll be like pulling one thread and watching a whole sweater unravel. They spent the next few hours planning their escape route. Nora would create a distraction in the communications center while Jake triggered his cascade failure. During the confusion, they would meet at Shuttle Bay 3 and steal one of the smaller, faster ships. There's one more thing, Nora said as they prepared to separate. Dr. Neff has been asking questions about the ethics of the neural extraction. I think she's having second thoughts about the whole thing. Do you think she would help us? Jake asked. Maybe, Nora said, but we can't count on it. We have to assume we're on our own. On the third day, with only hours left before they reached Starbase 7, Jake put his plan into action. He started in the engine room, where he had the most access to critical systems. Jake carefully adjusted the quantum field generators, not enough to cause another crisis, but enough to make them work slightly harder than normal. The computers would notice the increased power consumption and try to compensate. Next, he moved to the life support systems. Jake made tiny changes to the air recycling filters that would cause the computers to think the air was not clean enough. The system would work harder to purify air that was already perfectly fine. In the navigation section, Jake adjusted sensor calibrations so they would give readings that were just slightly off. The computers would try to correct for errors that did not really exist. Each change was small enough to avoid triggering alarms, but together they would force the ship's computers to work much harder than necessary. When Jake was ready, he would cause one major failure that would overwhelm the already stressed systems. Jake was making his final preparations when alarms started going off throughout the ship. He froze, wondering if someone had discovered his sabotage early. But the alarms were coming from the communications center, not the engine room. Jake realized that Nora had started her part of the plan. Security alert in communications, came an announcement over the ship's speakers. All security personnel report to Deck 7 immediately, Jake smiled. Nora was giving him the distraction he needed. It was time to trigger the cascade failure. He crawled back to the quantum field generators and found the manual override controls he had used during the original crisis. This time, instead of fixing the harmony between the generators, Jake was going to break it. He carefully adjusted the controls until the generators began working against each other again. But this time, instead of the violent shaking from before, Jake created a more subtle disharmony. The computers would detect the problem and try to fix it automatically. The result was exactly what Jake had hoped for. The ship's computers began redirecting power and resources to deal with the generator problem. But as they did, they ran into all the other small problems Jake had created throughout the ship. The life support computers demanded more power to run the air filters. The navigation computers needed more processing power to correct the sensor errors. The lighting systems, the gravity generators, the artificial intelligence cores, everything began competing for resources that were no longer available. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnels as alarms began going off all over the ship. He could hear crew members running through the corridors, shouting orders in different languages. The ship's automatic systems were failing one by one as the computers became more and more confused. He reached Shuttle Bay 3 just as Nora arrived from the opposite direction. She was breathing hard and had a cut on her forehead, but she was smiling. "How did it go?" Jake asked. "I may have accidentally crashed their entire communications network," Nora said. "They'll be lucky if they can talk to each other, let alone call for help." "Perfect," Jake said. "Let's get out of here." They ran toward the nearest shuttle, a small two-person ship designed for short-range reconnaissance. Nora used her access codes to open the shuttle bay doors while Jake started the engines. "Wait," Nora said suddenly. "Someone's coming?" Jake looked up to see Dr. Neth entering the shuttle bay. The alien scientist was moving quickly, carrying something in her forearms. Jake's heart sank. They had been so close to escaping, but instead of calling for security, Dr. Neth ran toward their shuttle. "Take me with you," she said when she reached. Then Jake stared at her in shock. "What?" "I cannot be part of what they plan to do to you," Dr. Neth said firmly. "And I cannot let them do it to other humans either. If you are escaping, I want to help. How do we know this isn't a trap?" Nora asked suspiciously. Dr. Neth held up the device she had been carrying. "This contains all my research on human neural patterns. Everything the consortium would need to continue their experiments. If I come with you, they lose years of work." Jake looked at Nora, who nodded slowly. "Get in," Jake said. "But if you try to betray us, I understand," Dr. Neth said, climbing into the shuttle. "I am betraying my own people by doing this. I would not do it unless I believed it was right." Jake fired up the shuttle's engines as the bay doors finished opening. In the distance, he could see security teams finally arriving, but they were too late. The shuttle shot out into space, leaving the stellar dawn behind in the darkness. Jake had escaped, but he knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge would be staying free and finding a way to protect Earth from the consortium's plans. As they flew away from the ship, Jake realized that his human brain had done something the aliens thought was impossible. It had outhought their most advanced systems and turned their own logic against them. Maybe being human was not such a disadvantage after all. The small shuttle flew through space for 3 days before Jake realized they had a bigger problem than just staying hidden. They were running out of fuel, and there was nowhere safe to land. "The nearest human colony is 6 months away," Nora said, checking their navigation system. "We have maybe 2 weeks of fuel left. What about alien worlds?" Jake asked. "All under consortium control," Dr. Neth said sadly. "They will have sent our descriptions to every starbase and planet in this sector. We cannot land anywhere without being captured." Jake stared out at the stars, thinking hard. They had escaped from the stellar dawn, but they were still trapped. Worse, Dr. Neth had been right about the consortium's bigger plans. They would not stop with Jake. They would find more humans to study, and Earth would have no way to protect itself. "We need to change the rules of the game," Jake said finally. "What do you mean?" Nora asked. "The consortium thinks human brains are valuable because we can solve problems they cannot," Jake explained. "But they want to study us like laboratory animals. What if we proved that humans deserve to be treated as equals instead?" Dr. Neth looked confused. "How would you do that?" Jake smiled. "By beating them at their own game. In public, where everyone can see," Jake explained his idea. The consortium was powerful because other species believed they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. But what if Jake could prove that human thinking was not just different, but actually better at solving certain kinds of problems? "You want to challenge the entire galactic scientific consortium to a contest?" Nora asked. "Not the entire consortium," Jake said. "Just their best engineers. I want to challenge them to fix something that they have failed to repair for years." Dr. Neth's forearms moved excitedly. "The wreck of Epsilon Prime," she said. "What's that?" Jake asked. "A massive cargo ship that was damaged in a quantum storm 5 years ago," Dr. Neth explained. "It has been floating in space ever since because no one can figure out how to fix it. The consortium has sent their best engineers to work on it dozens of times, but the damage is too complex. Perfect, Jake said. How many people would watch if I challenged them to a public repent test? Billions, Dr. Neth said. The failure to fix that ship has become a symbol of the consortium's limitations. If someone could actually repair it, especially a human, it would change everything. Nora was already working on her communication equipment. I can broadcast a challenge message across the entire galactic network. But are you sure about this, Jake? If you lose, they will have you exactly where they want you. If I do nothing, they will catch us eventually anyway, Jake replied. At least this way, I have a chance to save other humans from the same fate. They spent the next day crafting the perfect challenge. Jake would offer to repair the wreck of Epsilon Prime in a public contest against the consortium's best engineers. If he won, the consortium would have to recognize humans as equals and abandon their neural extraction project. If he lost, he would surrender himself for their experiments. The consortium will never accept, Dr. Neth said. The risk to their reputation is too great. They will if we make it impossible for them to refuse, Jake said. We broadcast the challenge across the galaxy and make it clear that they are afraid to compete with a primitive human. Pride will force them to accept. Nora sent the message on every frequency that reached civilized space. Within hours, the challenge was being discussed on news networks across hundreds of worlds. The idea that a human might succeed where the consortium's best minds had failed was too exciting for people to ignore. The consortium's response came faster than Jake had expected. We accept your challenge, the official message said. The contest will take place at the wreck of Epsilon Prime in 72 hours. The conditions are as stated. We look forward to demonstrating the superiority of logical thinking over primitive intuition. Jake smiled at the insult. The consortium was confident they would win easily. That confidence might be their biggest weakness. They flew to the contest site, where they found hundreds of ships gathered to watch the event. News crews from dozens of species were broadcasting live coverage across the galaxy. Jake had never seen so many aliens in one place. The wreck of Epsilon Prime was exactly as Dr. Neth had described it. The massive cargo ship was twisted and broken, floating dead in space. Jake could see where quantum storms had torn holes in reality itself, leaving sections of the ship existing in multiple dimensions at once. It looks impossible to fix, Nora said quietly. Good, Jake replied. Impossible problems are the only ones worth solving. The consortium had sent their 3 best engineers to compete against Jake. They arrived in a ship 10 times larger than Jake's shuttle, filled with the most advanced repair equipment in the galaxy. Their leader was Chief Engineer Vaxter, famous throughout the galaxy for solving impossible technical problems. Human, Vaxter said when they met at the airlock of the damaged ship. I admit I am curious to see what primitive methods you will attempt to use. I am curious too, Jake said with a smile. The rules were simple. Each team had 24 hours to repair as much of the ship as possible. Whoever made the most progress would be declared the winner. Judges from neutral species would monitor the contest to ensure fairness. Jake entered the wreck with nothing but basic tools and a portable air supply. The consortium team brought computers, quantum analyzers, molecular repair devices, and equipment that Jake did not even recognize. Inside the ship, Jake quickly understood why the damage had been impossible to repair. The quantum storms had not just broken the machinery. They had twisted the laws of physics in small areas throughout the ship. In some places, gravity flowed sideways. In others, time moved at different speeds. The consortium team immediately began running detailed scans and analysis. They were trying to map every anomaly and calculate exactly how to reverse the damage. It was logical, methodical, and completely wrong. Jake closed his eyes and listened to the ship. Even broken and twisted, it still had a rhythm. The quantum anomalies were not random damage. They were patterns, like a song that had been scrambled but not destroyed. Instead of fighting the anomalies, Jake began working with them. Where gravity flowed sideways, he used that force to help move heavy debris. Where time moved slowly, he placed equipment that needed to cure or cool down. Where reality was twisted, he found ways to twist it back into useful shapes. The consortium team watched in confusion as Jake began making rapid progress without using any advanced technology. They increased their own efforts, bringing in more equipment and running more detailed scans, but the harder they tried to analyze and control the damage, the more the quantum anomalies seemed to resist their efforts. Their logical approach was making the problems worse instead of better. Jake worked through the night, following his intuition and listening to what the ship was trying to tell him. By morning, he had restored power to 3 entire sections and stabilized most of the dangerous anomalies. The consortium team had managed to repair only one small area, and even that was unstable. "Time is up," announced the chief judge. When the results were announced, the watching crowds erupted in amazement. Jake had not just repaired more of the ship than the consortium team. He had fixed problems that their scans said were impossible to solve. Chief Engineer Vaxter stared at Jake with something that might have been respect. "How did you know which anomalies to approach first?" "I listened to the ship," Jake said simply. "It told me what it needed." "Ships do not talk, Vaxter." "Sod, everything talks if you know how to listen," Jake replied. The consortium had no choice but to honor their agreement. In front of billions of watching beings across the galaxy, they officially recognized humans as equals and abandoned their neural extraction project. But more importantly, they announced a new initiative. Instead of studying human brains by cutting them out, they would work with humans to learn how different types of thinking could solve different kinds of problems. Dr. Neth was appointed to lead the new Human-Alien Cognitive Cooperation Project. Her first task was to establish research stations on Earth where humans and aliens could work together as partners instead of subjects and scientists. Jake returned to Earth as a hero, but he was more interested in the workshops that were being built than in the attention he received. For the first time, humans and aliens would work together to solve problems that neither could handle alone. The galaxy was about to discover that the best solutions came not from having the smartest individuals, but from bringing different kinds of smart together. Jake smiled as he watched the first mixed teams of humans and aliens begin their work. His brain was staying right where it belonged, inside his head, thinking thoughts that no one else could think. And that was exactly how it should be.